What's up, everybody? This is Leon, the Paperback Maniac, and I'm here to give you guys another quick and dirty paperback horror novel review. Now, today, we are taking a look at Aftershock by Robert W. Walker. This book was published in 1987 by St. Martin's Press. Now, just feast your eyes on that gloriously trashy piece of pulp horror art there. Believe it or not, this artwork is actually fairly representative of the novel. What you see here is, for the most part, what you get. Also representative of the novel is the synopsis on the back, which I will read now as usual. The Mutant. In a secret laboratory beneath LA's streets, a group of top scientists worked on the ultimate biological weapon, daring to create what humans were never meant to know. The monster. Then the earthquake hit. Its epicenter, downtown LA, a city now filled with twisted steel and mangled flesh and terror. Because from its sterile laboratory, something unspeakable had been freed. The plague. Doctors Mike McCain and lovely Casey Stearns worked feverishly to save the quake survivors mysteriously dying from a new alien disease. But no disease could account for some of the corpses. Mutilated, headless, horrible. And no medicine could stop the thing hiding in the rubble, watching, reaching out with blood-stained claws for the unsuspecting, the injured, or for you. Now, if that synopsis sounds to you like the stuff of B-movie schlock horror, you would actually be quite correct. As I was reading this book, I was constantly reminded of science fiction horror films clearly having quite a big influence on this book. Not to mention, of course, first and foremost, the granddaddy of them all, Alien. Particularly the first one and the second one, Aliens. There are some scenes toward the end of Aftershock in the sewers where the monster is chasing the two protagonists through the kind of the dank, wet sewers. That was very reminiscent of Aliens, the second one. That one was quite an influence. Also, I was thinking about 1987's craptacular Creepazoids, directed by David Dakota and starring the lovely Linnea Quigley. I was also reminded of 1989's The Terror Within, Roger Corman classic monster movie. I also was reminded of 1977's The Incredible Melting Man, especially in with regard to the monster and what the monster started out as. And maybe most of all, I was reminded of 1983's The Being, again, especially in regards to the monster itself and sort of like what the monster ended up being. So, clearly this book has had its fair share of cinematic influences, not only in its premise, but also in the way that it delivers action and set pieces. It's written in a very vivid and cinematic way, which makes for some pretty compulsive reading, I may say, if I may say so myself. This book was basically just a whole lot of fun. You have to be a person who appreciates pulp horror, clearly. If that cover looks appealing to you, then you are probably the person who would like this book. The premise is fun, good schlocky fun. So essentially, it opens with a husband and wife scientist team working secretly in an underground research laboratory for a millionaire named Leo Koppelmeyer, who gets these government contracts, these secret government contracts, and they are working in secret on a chemical biological weapon, right? A chemical biological weapon, very, very dangerous. They have to wear these protective, like, astronaut-type suits when they're around this virus that they're creating. And of course, in a moment when they're both in the chamber where the virus is contained, that is when the earthquake hits, folks. A humongous, high magnitude earthquake in LA, right where they are, at its epicenter, downtown, underneath the Koppelmeyer Center for Disease Control. And of course, the virus gets released and infects, contaminates all three of the two scientists and Leo Koppelmeyer, the kind of the head honcho. One of those people does not necessarily die per se, but instead mutates into a hideous, deformed, hunchbacked beast that goes about on a rampage of mutilation, death, and destruction. First underground, trapped in the rubble, and we do get a lot of scenes from the monster's perspective, which was very interesting. And the author actually gives us a little pathos for the monster. Unlike a lot of these movies I showed, which can't do that because they're movies, in a book, we do get to find out a little bit about this monster, and it's actually kind of sad. This monster, this being, because of the infection, it is like constantly in excruciating pain. Like everything it does, every movement is just like mind-numbingly painful for this thing, especially in its abdominal muscles. And the only thing that can assuage its pain, what do you think it is? That's right, it's human flesh, human organs, particularly brains. It loves brains, so it has to eat to just to abate the pain that's constantly messing it up, making it feel terrible. So first it goes after rats. Those aren't going to do it much good. Then it goes after some sewer workers underground, some rescue workers who are going, very brave men, a couple of what they call quote unquote moles going through the rubble trying to find survivors of the quake. Kills a couple of them. But then, that's not enough. It finds an egress, and it goes out and starts exploring, the city at night. It goes in like parking garages, just scenes that were straight out of like an 80s horror movie, and it'll like attack people, it'll hide. And of course, we're getting these things from the monster's perspective, so it'll describe the cars as like these like machines with, piercing lights, and pretty interesting. Sometimes, however, when it describes attacks on humans, when we're getting it from the monster's perspective, the only thing is that it does sort of make it a little less, I don't know, scary, I guess you would say, because we can't really relate so much with the monster as you could, if it was from the victim's perspective. However, it was a nice change, and we do also get scenes written from the human's perspective as they're being pursued and running away from this mutant beast. But very fast. Plot is never boring. The writing, for the most part, it was actually surprisingly solid. Robert W. Walker knows how to write a set piece, and the prose was crisp and clean, and descriptive without going over the top. Actually, it reminded me quite a bit of like some UK horror authors. And in fact, when I was reading this, I wondered if Mr. Walker actually was British. It definitely just had the feel. It kind of reminded me particularly of John Halkin. John Halkin wrote like a series of books, Slither, Slime, Squelch. It really reminded me of him. In fact, if this had been like a one-off, like many of these 80s paperbacks are, if this author had never published anything else, I might even be inclined to suspect it was, someone like Halkin writing under a pseudonym, but that's not the case. I looked it up, and Robert W. Walker actually is an American, and he's written dozens of books. Thankfully, I will definitely be reading more of his stuff. But the writing was actually good up until the inevitable sex scene, because, of course, we have, there are a couple of different protagonists. We are introduced to, as mentioned in the synopsis, Doctors Casey Stearns, beautiful, of course, a complete 10, virologist, doctor, and the accompanying handsome male, Mike McCain. And, they meet toward the beginning of the book, right before the earthquake. And the minute they lock eyes on each other, that they're going to be getting it on. And boy, do they get it on in a torrid scene. One of them, I forget which one, loses their house or their apartment. And, immediately after the quake, they set up this emergency shelter system. They're selflessly working to help people and victims. They're perfect heroes. But eventually they get tired, and I think it's the woman, Casey. She suggests to the man, well, I have this big apartment, plenty of space. You need your rest, Mike. You should come and get some rest. And of course he goes back to her place, and they do get it on. And that's where it does get a little cringy, I must say. The sex scene is very, very cheesy. If the Bad Sex Awards in fiction had been around back in 1987 and they had gotten a hold of this book, it would have been a pretty clear contender, I think, for that award. But I love it. I can't fault it for that. I mean, of course, in a book like this with a cover like that, that's to be expected, some cringeworthy sex. So that really doesn't mark it down too much from me. But yeah, it's a fun book. If you like those kinds of movies that I showed, if you're into science fiction, horror, there are some scenes I feel like the author was going out of his way to really, he gives all of this kind of science kind of jargon and really trying to sell it to the reader, try to give a little verisimilitude to this nonsense and, all this scientific mumbo jumbo. I felt like that was a little unnecessary. I mean, if this were Sean Hudson, he wouldn't have bothered to do that. But, I guess you got to give him props. At least he's trying to, treat it a little seriously. But, yeah, if you like pulp horror and if you like science fiction horror and, monster horror, I would recommend seeking this one out. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed reading it, and I definitely look forward to reading more Robert W. Walker books in the future. So, yeah, that is Aftershock. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, consider subscribing to the channel. I try to post regularly. I will be probably doing another edition of Mailbox Horrors shortly, probably this weekend, so keep an eye out for that. And of course, more reviews and collection videos and other horrific things. So yeah, thanks for watching again. Have a great night. I will catch you guys later. Peace out.